Welcome to day 7 of 30 Days of Essential Oils. My name is Tammy Davis. I am your mentor and neighborhood alchemist, so to speak. I do have a background in aromatherapy as a internationally certified master clinical aromatherapist. My background includes pharmacology, epigenetics, the study of plant constituents as it relates to human health and drug development, which is a lot of what you get in all of these. Now, the videos I'm doing, this is 30 days of essential oils. I did do one for 31 days of essential oils. If you're new, I invite you to take a look at that if you haven't seen that segment before making suggestions on oils that you might like to see or hear me talk about here. Because what I'm looking for is your input. The more I would like to know what you want to know about, the more I'm able to, I have my ideas, but group participation is fun, and I am here to serve you. That said, along with the 31 days of essential oils, I did start blogging along with those. I'm continuing on keeping up with those. I am currently working on one for cardamom. So if you get into it, you'll see I'm kind of like halfway through the last segment. That's because I took most of the summer off from doing this, and I'm only now catching up. However, I will be doing a series of blogs on this segment as well. It's different than what I talk about here in the videos. The blogs get more specific. There's a lot more content. It's easier for me to be able to sit down and spell out a lot of things, because for as much as I like to advocate for the oils, they do require, if there's a dog that barks, I'm going to do my best not to jump. I lost my train of thought. So, but I'm doing my best, because what I want to do is I want to keep these different, so the information you get here does not match what you get in the blogs, although there will be some parallels, because why we're talking about the oils. And as I said, I'm also a very big advocate for the use of oils. However, through my research and my work, it's becoming evidently clear that we really need to look at how we're using them. Not because I want them taken away from us, but because I want us to be healthier. I want us to have a better experience with them. And that is a predominant reason why I do these videos. Although I will tell you, like today, for instance, we're going to be talking about German chamomile. I will talk about how I've used them and what health conditions. The blogs get into the reasons why we don't want to use them, which primarily involves medications. That said, I am currently working on a safe list of oils to be able to be used no matter what medications we're taking. And believe it or not, there's 10. Out of all the oils we have, only 10 are safe to use for everyone at any age, regardless of the medications being taken. That is how serious this work is. And again, I don't want this taken away from us. We have a really great tool for wellness at our fingertips. And at the same time, if we're not using them and integrating them more mindfully and understanding how they work in the system, then we are actually bringing harm to our body. And I did do a video recently on adverse reactions. If you haven't watched that, please check that out, because I do explain that adverse reactions aren't necessarily something we experience right away. Sometimes it takes a while. So that's important. And again, with all of the research that I do, it's becoming evidently clear that although they study these individual constituents, and a lot of them are being patented for excessive use, and I mean excessive use. We are using so many chemicals these days, and nature communicates via chemicals. We are nature. We are not separate from nature. And it's infiltrating our systems, and our systems are becoming more and more disrupted. This is the reason for the safe list of oils. Because we can offset this disruption safely. And if we are children, or we have children, or we are adults that are not taking medications, then you know what? The information I share in these videos, please use them, because that's what they're here for. But if you're taking medications, there's a lot that we can't be mixing. There's just not a lot. I actually found myself extraordinarily discouraged as I was writing, because I love them. I love what they have to offer our systems. I love the potential, and that's the reason why, just kind of narrowing it down like I did, we can really do a world of good, even just introducing just these 10 oils. They're not the expensive oils for the most part. They're not the expensive ones, and they are single notes, which is more important than blends. If you haven't watched me before, first of all, thank you for being here. And number two, I don't recommend blends. I'm not the only one that talks like that. Blends are pre-made blends. Okay, that's what I mean by blends. I don't recommend pre-made blends because they could potentially include oils that your body doesn't need. They could potentially include oils that would interact with medications. And trust me, they do. And what's more significant is, as I started to say, although they recognize how a single constituent affects the human genome, meaning what genetic receptors it influences, they cannot account for the synergy that goes in, that is the nature. It's synergy is nature. It's the energy that creates this cohesiveness. It's what creates the flow. Okay, so that's what synergy does. It actually creates the flow. It's like, okay, so this constituent is going to, flip this switch. It's going to influence that genetic receptor, and this one's going to influence that genetic receptor, and the two of them. And so we have the two of them combined, and then of course, we can look at it from that angle. And that's the way I did look at it for the longest time. And then recently, over this last month, I've really come to understand that we cannot account for those individual activations or deactivations. We have to understand that a chemical interacts. That's the reason why you can look at the constituent panel of any particular essential oil, and you're going to actually see that some of them look very similar. So why is it that they have different properties? Well, for one, there's other constituents involved, which is going to alter the way the chemicals interact. Okay, that's primarily what it is. But if you look at a lot of literature, it'll say the primary properties of an essential oil are based off of the first two, possibly three constituents. That's fair. But everything has a part. I used to support my kids in theater. I worked back, behind the scenes. I was on what am I trying to say? Technical. I was on the technical side of theater, and some kids would get really, really upset because, well, they had really tiny roles. But the fact is if they didn't fulfill that role, the play would not be the same. It would have been incomplete. So everything has a role. So even if there is only 0.68% of a constituent, it has a role. So we cannot just come down to saying, oh, well, the first two, and there you go, pitch out the rest. No, we have to look at all of them. And the way these chemicals speak to one another influences the way it affects our system. And our system is going to respond based on the way it's currently wired today. If you've taken one of these DNA tests where you volunteer your saliva into a tube, well, you have to pay for it to be studied, but you know what I'm getting at, right? When you willingly spit into a tube and ship it off somewhere, that DNA, that snapshot is just a snapshot of your body on that day. The epigenome is wired to adapt, and it does this through a series of changes every single day. There's thousands upon thousands of genetic processes that occur just to keep us alive. It has nothing to do with protecting us. Well, it does. It has a lot to do with protect, but it has nothing to do with the introduction of chemicals. It's just our own chemical processes. And a great example of that is, for instance, when the autonomic nervous system, our lives become threatened, or we're really worried about something, and so stress, boom, right? That shift is going to increase blood pressure. Like when my dogs bark unexpectedly, my heart starts to race until I realize that they're just making noise. But in the meantime, in that little switch in time, the angiotensin II receptor is activated, which means now we have more angiotensin hormone flooding into the system, which elevates our blood pressure. Well, that little switch right there, that is one turning on, but then it turns off the next genetic activity, which is the reduction of our ability to metabolize gluten and casein, believe it or not. So if we cannot break down gluten and casein, we're pretty much guaranteed that we're struggling with higher levels of angiotensin flowing through the body. But that's one minor change that occurs. And this is happening through every chemical in our system. And the point of that is that the epigenome is really designed to change. And the saliva test that you took is a snapshot of that day. And so how your body responds to an oil today may actually be different than the way it responds to an oil tomorrow, depending on what's going on in your life. Now, if you use them on a regular basis and you're able to maintain some level of de-escalation from stress, you might actually have better responses to these oils and more predictable responses to the oils. However, like I said, only recommend using any of these oils at this point, unless I say it's safe to use for everything. And like today, for instance, German chamomile is not safe for everyone. It's safe for children and adults at all ages, with the exception of anybody who's taking a number of types of medications, which includes something like, respiratory medications. If you have COPD or cystic fibrosis or things like that, any kind of respiratory challenge that you're facing, you don't want to use German chamomile. Same thing goes for acid reflux. It actually interacts with the medication that I know firsthand is Zantac, and it's the Chamomile in it. And the funny thing about it is, Chamomile is a very insignificant. It's a very insignificant constituent, although it is the reason why it's blue. So chamomile is actually in a number of oils like blue yarrow, which is what I talked about in the last segment. However, the chamomile is known to interact with its very specific genetic liver enzyme, and with Zantac, it completely reverses the effects of the oil itself. So when you think you're using it for calming and soothing, and you mix it with Zantac, the next thing you know is you have anxiety. And I know this, like I said, because this was an experience of mine with a child that I was serving. And believe it or not, this child really was on Zantac at the age of 6. And the doctor had put them on this without me knowing about it. And I found out afterwards. So we had to change out the oil because I'm not in a position to change out medications. So just be warned that is the reason for the way I talk about the oils. And in the case of German chamomile, it contains constituents that actually increase the skin permeability. So it helps with taking things in through the skin. It actually does increase tissue permeability. But more importantly, I have specifically used it for what am I trying to say here? I'm listening to noises outside and I'm just waiting for my dogs. I apologize for that. I have used it specifically for things like sleep. Okay, it's excellent for sleep. Again, this is not one that you want to mix with a sleep medication, because typically these sleep medications are going to be metabolized on the very same liver enzyme that German chamomile is metabolized on. And so that interaction could increase blood serum levels, so it could have an additive effect, or it could have an opposite effect. So you don't want to mix it with sleep medication. However, again, children and adults of all ages, as long as you're not taking medication, this is a superb oil for these reasons. Respiratory issues like asthma, cystic fibrosis, COPD. My guess is if you've already been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis or COPD, you're probably taking some form of medication. If you're not, get on it and use it 3 to 4 times a day. That combined with myrtle green. Again, I'm making suggestions based on the fact that you're not using medications. Now, please be advised, I am not a physician, so I cannot tell you how to mix these with, I can tell you how to mix them with medications, but if you are concerned about your health, you do need to seek the advice of a medical doctor. However, I am capable and very capable of helping you mix oils. That's the reason for the safe list with your meds. So that said, any sort of respiratory challenge, German chamomile is superb with. Sleep is another one. It mixes really, really well with things like frankincense and myrrh. And if you're not taking medications, you can use it to go to sleep. It is a good antifungal. So if yeast is an issue, and especially from feminine hygiene, there's a lot of estrogen involvement with that, which will cause some excitability. So using German chamomile or like when you have a vaginal yeast infection, in the bath is really, again, very nice. It's a superb anti-inflammatory, and those would be the reasons that I like to use it a lot. But beyond that, I mean, there are other purposes for it that, I mean, people can, I should say other properties, but those are the primary ones that I like, because when we are dealing with digestive and yeast issues, there is a significant change that's occurred on the nitric oxide synthase. And so this one actually helps to offset those changes and, and help stabilize the respiratory system and the immune system, because that is definitely involved with this. But again, you want to make sure that you're really careful with what you're mixing it with. Bear with me a second. It is definitely not Roman chamomile. Just, I want to be clear about that. No, I think I've said everything I want to say here as far as my notes are concerned. Yeah, pretty much. That's what I would use it for. As I said, nitric oxide synthase. And when we have nitric oxide synthase issues, meaning alterations to that genetic process, what that means is that there's a reduction in nitric oxide because the body's stressed, or a reduction in the production of nitric oxide because the body's stressed. So we end up seeing mental health issues, or mood disorders. We see digestive disorders, we see respiratory issues, and we can also see cardiovascular issues. So that said, that's the reason why this is a really superb oil to be using, especially for children who are living with ADHD, autism, that kind of issue, because you can help them to sleep, which really helps to begin to regulate the the brain chemistry. You can also use it, like I said, digestive disruption is a big deal when it comes to nitric oxide changes. So, because it increases histamine levels. This is the reason why we have a tendency to see higher levels of yeast, because when histamine goes up, estrogen goes up. And I can get into all of why that happens, but ultimately the stress response, what it does is it slows down our ability to break down glucose and protein. This is the reason why we begin to see oxidative stress build up, because we have an increase in particles that the body cannot break down. So by using this particular oil, again, you can even use it on the digestive system because it's very supportive of the liver as well. It'll help restore that peace, that sense of inner peace that is required for the breakdown of macronutrients. I hope that makes sense. So again, German chamomile is really very good for helping to calm and soothe the body, helping to calm and soothe, more specifically, the autonomic nervous system, which in turn really helps to redirect digestion and improve the level of digestion. It also helps to offset the potential for any sort of respiratory issues. So including this on a regular basis, if you have children right now that are not sleeping or having trouble sleeping, as long as they're not taking medication, please use this with them, because it will help be something that they can use as a preventive for any further significant health challenges with their digestion, their health, their heart, their lungs, and so forth. All right. So I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you who have been with me this whole time, I can't thank you enough. So anyway, just know that I appreciate you. Feel free to sign up for the newsletter that I have. Comes out monthly. Occasionally, if I have a little special announcement. But for the most part, it's just a once-a-month thing. You can do that in the description box below. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Also ask to join the Aromatherapy is a Lifestyle group. It's a closed Facebook group just because I don't want all the material just highly searchable. It is exclusive material. It's my life's work. So check it out. Let me know what questions you have about there, or if you'd like to join. All right. Thanks again, you guys. Until tomorrow, I'm talking about a Lemmy.